Hello everybody, welcome back to another video from the beautiful Llyn Peninsula here in North Wales. I'm at a place called Porth Ysgaden and it's somewhere that I've wanted to come to for quite a while because there's a few pretty interesting things here that I think photographically could be pretty interesting to share with you. Now, if you saw last week's video, you would have seen that I was in Llyn National Park photographing some abandoned buildings, and I don't necessarily want to go down the same route again today, although there are some pretty cool abandoned buildings in this little cove. But what I want to talk about today is the importance of getting away from just shooting single images and thinking about your photography a little bit differently. So I understand the statement of moving away from taking single images is slightly misleading and confusing, so let's clarify what I meant by that. So in last week's video, I mentioned that I myself in my photography wanted to step away from focusing on those single compositions, going to a location to find that one photo that encapsulates everything that that particular location has to offer. And I think it comes from a social media climate where a lot of us are posting our work on social media, on Instagram, where you just want to be sharing your single best photos and, you know, you're constrained to certain aspect ratios and formats. And I think that takes away from the joy in the process of doing photography, and I wanted to step away from that. And this is why I'm dedicating a lot more time to YouTube, because there isn't really any format for photography on YouTube. You can pretty much share any photo in any aspect ratio that you like, and that's something that I find quite liberating. And I'm not knocking social media. I think we've all had spells of probably enjoying posting on Instagram when we had an audience and we were engaging with different photographers. It was great, but when I was solely dedicated to sharing my work on there because I wanted to enjoy that sense of community, it meant that I was sharing a lot of my work in a vertical aspect ratio. And that's just something that in recent times, in the last few years, I just don't think about it anymore. I now just want to focus on taking the photo in whatever aspect ratio is right for that scene. And this for me now means that sky's basically the limit with my photography. I've come out in recent years less interested in just kind of getting those banger photos. And yes, it's great when those opportunities come to get a single image that is just absolutely perfect, but I find a lot more enjoyment in trying to document locations using multiple images where any one photo may not necessarily be great on its own, but when you collate all of these images into a gallery, they tell a really compelling story of any particular location that you visit. You find so much more joy in photography when you are able to immerse yourself in all the nuances of a location rather than just kind of focusing on the big epic vista or epic composition. It makes you a little bit more in tune with your surroundings and it forces you to explore a little bit further. And well, it just gives you more photos to edit. And that's something else that I really love to do. Now, this idea of taking multiple photos in a location to really document it and tell a story really does depend on where it is you like to go. Now, for me, I'm just a pretty curious person. I like to try and find places that are either sort of like culturally significant or have quite a rich history in some way. And Porth Ysgaden, where I am today, is a good example of that because there's quite a few different aspects of this location that can photographically work really well. It's quite a popular fishing area. All of these kind of sheds and cabins that are left quite derelict were all used by fishermen, and all of these coves are sort of landing platforms, I suppose, for fishing fleets. Obviously, with this being coastal, there's a lot of great aspects of coastal photography you can do here, and there's the gable end of that sort of ruined building, which is just quite bizarre and quite striking. And you have this little cottage behind me. There's just so many different aspects of photography that can be done here, and any one of those wouldn't necessarily be impactful on their own necessarily. But when you stitch all of these different subjects together, it makes for quite a unique portrayal of a particular place. Now is a good time to be getting into this approach of creating galleries from places, because especially now with Instagram and its carousel function where you can post multiple images on one post, and rumour has it that's a better reach metric or engagement metric for Instagram, and whether or not that's true, who knows, because one, nobody can predict Instagram, and two, who cares at this point. But you know, if you are trying to harbour a sense of community, then these little tactics can be pretty beneficial when it comes to maximizing or optimizing your imagery. So some tips to think about that are pretty universal when it comes to approaching photography in this way is pinpointing a few, I guess, overarching themes of any place that you're going. Now, I'm visiting this place at the start of the summer. There's some really lovely wildflower around here. There's some really nice colors, and I've chosen to come sort of for golden hour-ish. I'm a little bit early for that, but it's all about the color and it's all about the light. And I'm using that as the overarching subject for all of the images that I'm using today. So every single one should have some aspect of light, whether it's side light on a building, whether it's getting some of these wildflowers in the foreground to really give that feeling of seasonality in images. And that subject could be anything. It could be the weather, it could be the time of year, it could be choosing to shoot everything on one particular focal length, or it could be narrowing it down to one particular location that you restrict yourself to. Any one overarching subject just gives you parameters to shoot within, and that is a really helpful way to make sure that everything that you create for your gallery has a certain sense of cohesion, because that's the most important aspect of all of this. Is it's all very well and good taking multiple photos of one location, but they all need to feel and seem connected in some way. So I'm back home now from what has been a great couple of days on the Llyn Peninsula in North Wales, and if you have enjoyed these recent outings that I've done with the camera, taking you out into the field and showing you some of these areas and how I approach photographing them, then do consider hitting the subscribe button so you can come along on future ventures, because that's something that I definitely want to focus a lot of time to on this channel, and I would love to hear down in the comments below if you enjoy that type of content. But back to today's video, I wanted to finish off these couple of points that I was mentioning around creating that cohesion and that common thread throughout a gallery or portfolio of images. And another great way to do that is by adopting an editing style that you use across multiple images. Now, seasonality is something that I always think is really important, because when you're looking back at images, or whether you're looking back at a portfolio that you did maybe last year or the year before, it's nice to be able to look at those photos and get a strong sense of the seasonality of the time of year that that photo or that gallery was created. I think it's great to have a common thread in your editing style. I definitely feel that I have started to develop my own sort of voice in terms of the tonal look of my images, and that's something that you can apply to all seasons, how you use the tone curve, or maybe how you manipulate highlights or shadows or contrast. But things like color are definitely things that I like to tweak and manipulate depending on the actual photo or the gallery or the time of year, because summer looks very different to autumn, which looks very different to winter, which looks very different to spring. And I feel like just having the same editing style for all seasons just doesn't necessarily work. It'll probably work well for some, but maybe not for others. So being adaptable in that just means that you're going to potentially get the best out of the photos that you create during these visits, these outings, these adventures that you have with your camera. Because let's face it, seasons definitely tell stories. The feeling of summer is something that is really easily portrayed in photos taken in summer if you make sure that you are using the colours correctly. There's tons of great colour in the summer. Wildflowers start to bloom, everything becomes saturated because the sun is so warm and so vibrant. But if you desaturate a lot of these things, then you're kind of losing that impact and you're not telling that story in its truest and, I guess, fullest potential. Another benefit of adopting this kind of multi-photo approach of any location is that for a viewer or anyone who is enjoying your photography, they're going to engage with that particular portfolio so much more deeply than they would if it was just a single image. And for that, you need to focus on a few different elements. It's great to have wide establishing shots that show the general scene of where you are, but it's also really important to focus on the details as well. In this particular portfolio, it's things like the boat, and it's the texture on the derelict sheds that are on the coastline, and it's the dog that's kind of tied to the front of the cottage. And I did make sure that it wasn't abandoned. The owners were just sat, you know, conveniently on the other side of the house, so they weren't in the frame. But I was definitely concerned when I first arrived because, yeah, there's definitely nobody living there. But all of these different elements can create a real sense of mystery and interest. And that sense of mystery and that sense of wonder is why this visual storytelling approach is so universally applicable and used in a ton of different applications, from magazines to advertising to gallery exhibitions. And it's because they evoke such a great feeling from the viewers of those photographs. So I would say if you're looking to do photography professionally, whether you just want to do that on the side, or maybe you just have some personal projects that you want to do, like making a photo book or a zine, then this type of exercise is crucial when you're doing work in those particular mediums, because it's really important to be able to get that point across in your photos to evoke that feeling and really portray a particular location to the best of its potential. I think if you go out and practice this, you'll definitely become a better photographer, because it ends up touching so many different genres of photography. You know, you do landscape photography, but you've also got things like street photography, you know, noticing that dog tied up to a derelict cottage. You know, that is the same type of thing that you would notice if you were on a street corner somewhere and somebody was leaning against a wall, you know, smoking a cigarette. It's the same type of observational interest. You start asking questions of, you know, why is that dog there? Same reason in street photography, like, who is that person? What do they do? It's all of this stuff that just makes the viewer ask more and more questions. Big grand vistas are definitely interesting, but photos that make you ask questions like why and how and who and where are going to be ones that are going to be far more compelling. So just a few things to bear in mind for future outings. As I mentioned in previous videos, this is just an exercise that I like to do as a bit of a challenge sometimes. When you're going to places, it's good to give yourself like a mission statement or a brief to work within, because at the end of the day, it's just fun, and photography should be fun. And I think if you do this regularly, you become so much more tuned in to your surroundings. You can really start to immerse yourself in these locations. And for me personally, as you know, if you're a regular viewer of this channel, the whole reason that I love photography is because it gets me out into nature, out into the landscape, and I get to enjoy all of these places and share them with you. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you have enjoyed it, please do consider giving the video a thumbs up so it can reach more people who are interested in this type of content. As I mentioned earlier, if you have enjoyed the video as well, do please consider hitting that subscribe button. It's free of charge, it's really easy to do, and it's something that I massively appreciate. As always, thank you so much for watching. New videos go out every Thursday, so I will see you guys next Thursday for the next one.